Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Anshuman, or AB for short. AB, how you doing today?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to chat with you. I've been following you. I don't know when I first came across your content. It's been at least a year, if not longer at this point. But, I live and breathe AppSec, and I'm always reading and writing and working in AppSec. And I came across your content. And like ever since I've been reading everything you put out. I enjoy your perspectives on all things AppSec, including, AI's intersection with AppSec. But for folks that don't follow you, don't know your content or background, can you share a little bit about yourself with us?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the kind words, Chris. It means a lot coming from you. So I am Anshuman. I've been in the information security space for about 16 years now. I started off my career as a security consultant. I used to work for this company called Cigital, which later got acquired by Synopsys, I believe. And that's how my security career journey began. And then I slowly transitioned my way more towards working for product-based companies. So I work for EMC, Atlassian, Intuit, and I've been with Lyft for the past 3 years or so. I'm currently the AppSec tech lead. And I've always enjoyed writing because I feel like there's so many things in my head, and as security professionals we have that curiosity mindset that we want to know about how things work, why they work the way they do. And I find that if I start writing my thoughts on a paper or like on a screen, right, I get a lot more clarity. So I started like kind of seriously writing about a year and a half ago, and I think that's about when you must have seen my articles. And yeah, I've had so many people reach out and say that they kind of resonate with the way I think through things, and I think I kind of bring that practitioner aspect to things, right? Because I've seen how things work, how things fail. So yeah, it's good to hear from you folks as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I read it, it was a combination of exactly what you described, where I was like, oh yeah, I've experienced that, or that's exactly how I think of the problem. And then also, you were doing some really innovative stuff with AI and tinkering around, when it comes to application security, vulnerability management, things like that. And
Yeah.
one of those is you built something you call secure vibes,
Yeah.
to address gaps in vibe coded applications, as you called it. And we've seen the rise
Yeah.
of platforms like Replit, Bolt, Lovable. Like, I'm curious, what's your perspective on why traditional SaaS tools like fundamentally fail when it comes to AI generated code? And like, why did you bet on this, secure vibes or multi-agent architecture rather than like a single agent scanner?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And for folks who might be interested in learning more about Secure Vibes, I now have a website, securevibes.ai. You can read all about the architecture, everything there. But to answer your question, I think when ChatGPT first came out, right, I started playing with it, and I was able to do so many things, right? Like I was able to write quick scripts and whatnot. And then slowly I started thinking about, okay, if I can have AI think the way I think or do things that I wanted to do, how can I think about finding security vulnerabilities in a slightly different way than what we've been used to, right? And so I kind of put my security hat on, and I started thinking about, okay, so if I am a security engineer and if I'm supposed to find security vulnerabilities in a code base, how would I go about it, right? So there are a few key steps that any security engineer would most likely do, right? The first is to understand what code base you're looking at. What is the architecture? What are the technologies being used? What are the technology stack? How is authentication being implemented? How is authorization being implemented? Like, there's so many questions about a code base that if you don't understand how things are happening, trying to find a security vulnerability in that code base is going to be very difficult because you don't understand what's happening. So I kind of took that approach, and I'm like, okay, can I build agents that would do these individual activities that I do as a security engineer? So things like architecture assessment, threat modeling, code review, and then verification of the exploits, right? So that's kind of the idea I had in mind when I started building Secure Vibes. And I think just around that time, Anthropic released their Claude Agent SDK. Claude Agent SDK is basically you can programmatically build anything with Claude Code, right? Like if you don't want to use Claude Code CLI, you can use the Agent SDK to have the same experience. So I just started playing with it, and I think there were some native constructs in the SDK that made it really easy to build small agents that are specialized in specific activities. So I kind of, went down that route. I started exploring things like sub agents, skills, hooks, all of these things that are, available in the SDK. And I found out soon that if I simply ask Claude or like the Claude CLI to find a security vulnerability, it will do a decent job. And I think Anthropic even released a slash command slash security review, and then Claude would do its thing. But then as I started digging into it, I realized, we've heard about context engineering, right? We've heard about if you don't give AI the right context, the outcomes aren't going to be what you expect. So I'm like, okay, if I just ask Claude to find security vulnerabilities, it will find a few ones, right? But if I really wanted to dig deep into the code base and understand the architecture first, code first, and then find how would I go about it. So that's really the idea behind, okay, now Secure Vibes is basically sort of an orchestration platform which has multiple agents, and each agent specializes in certain things. So there's a threat modeling agent. It can use certain skills. It can take the output from the architecture assessment agent, right? So, and I find that division of labor really works well, because if I find that the threat model isn't giving me the right outcome, I can go and change the prompt. I can add more skills to it, right? And this flexibility allows me to really, keep improving the platform as we go. As compared to, if I just built something around Cloud CLI, there were so many moving pieces that fixing one thing would break other things. It's also how I learned to deal with AI systems and workflows, right? Because we know the non-deterministic nature of these systems. So how, as we engineers, can bake in that determinism is really key. And using like some of these constructs that are available in the SDK allows us to do that. Sorry, that was a
No, it's a
long-winded
great.
answer, but yeah.
No, it's a great answer. I like a few things that you said there. First is like it kind of emphasizes like in security, we tend to be late adopters or laggers with technology. And in your case, you
Yeah.
kind of dove right in and experimented. And like, we often quip like how can you secure something if you don't understand it, right? And I'd argue the best way to understand it is to build with it or to experiment as you're doing. And then also it emphasizes, like you always hear, AI for security or security for AI. And like this is a great example of using AI for security, as you said, like this division of labor among the agents for different purposes in AppSec. It does make me think of a workforce question. Like there's a lot of workforce implications and conversations around AI. If you have a situation where a single AppSec engineer like you can run these multi-agent architectures, doing these different activities, what do you think that means for their workforce? Is it taking away opportunities for other people to learn by doing some of these activities? Is it just a force multiplier? Is it both? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think this question is on top of minds of pretty much everybody, right? Because every company is adopting AI tools, or cloud code, cursors, of what have you. And what folks are starting to realize is that, these tools are getting really good, especially as the models are getting better and better. You can basically one-shot things, right? So I think the way I look at it is, using AI as a force multiplier. That is what I would. That is how I've been using AI, and that is how I would recommend anybody to start using AI. Right? Because I don't see a world where AI is going to replace humans. Yes, it will happen, but I think it will happen for a good reason. Like for example, to give an example, right? I, as a security engineer, I do certain things on a daily basis that is not really using my skills or my brain. It's just kind of repetitive things day out, day in. Right now, if I can have, or if I can build an agent that can do that for me, what that means is, I've essentially offloaded some of my mundane work to the AI agents, and now I can focus on more important things that might require my skills, my experience, right? Like more architecture based decisions, so to speak. So, and I think that's where the industry as such is going towards. And I think instead of thinking about it as, look, I'm going to lose my job, I would start questioning like, okay, if what I do as my job, is it really worth a human being to do that job, right? Like, can we as human beings do something else, right? So for me, I have a family, I have kids, I'm sure you have kids as well, right? So for me, spending time with the family is more important. So if that means that I can use AI to do some of my work when I can spend time with my family, then I see that as a good future.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And in the end, like the organization's getting the same outcome, right? Like, what are we trying to achieve? Whether I did it or AI did it, or I did it with the assistance of AI, ultimately we're after a certain outcome, right? And can we provide that outcome with use of technology. One thing I wanted to ask you about too is you've written about, kind of offensive versus defensive AI agents, whether it's AI security agents for things like vulnerability discovery or vulnerability management, or like on the offensive side, vulnerability exploitation, for example. When you look at this, like through your experiments and like kind of your thinking of this space, in the near term, where do you see the biggest opportunity? Do you see it as, the attacker having the advantage with AI, the defender having the advantage? How do you view that? Because we've seen just this past year, we've seen some interesting reports from Anthropic about cyber espionage, a lot of reports about, kind of commoditizing exploit generation via LLMs, but a lot of good things around using this technology to find vulnerabilities or do better prioritization or remediation, et cetera. Like how do you think about that dynamic?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You mentioned the Anthropic report. I think that was a pretty eye-opening report for pretty much a lot of people in the industry. Is like, look, these things have started to happen where attackers are using AI to basically completely hack into systems at scale. You're just using simple tools. It wasn't even sophisticated, right? So I think the attackers are already using AI effectively. And I think just yesterday or day before yesterday, I saw a blog from this person called Sean Heelan. I think it's kind of floating around LinkedIn. And I think Sean also used GPT and Opus to create exploits, right? So, these things are coming out now. And it is getting proven that, look, it is possible to use AI to generate exploits, to sort of build these offensive agents, right? So I think from the attackers side, it's already pretty clear to me, right? Like the attacks are happening, and I think it's only going to get magnified more and more. Now, on the defender side, I think that's where, like as security professionals, we are very skeptical, and for obvious reasons, right? With any new technology, whether it was Kubernetes or Docker containers and whatnot, the first reaction from security practitioners were like, okay, this is new technology. We should be caution, we should be cautious about how we use and how we deploy. And I think I'm seeing the same thing with AI, but with AI it's slightly different, because the productivity gains, the pace at which things are evolving is just too much for security people to just be skeptic, right? So I think from a defender side, it is possible to build AI agents, like we discussed, building defensive agents, building secure vibes, right? So, and I want to encourage more security people to start thinking about, okay, how can they use AI on a daily basis to effectively automate some of the defensive task as well, because there's no freaking way we can keep up with the attackers if we don't use AI ourselves as defenders. And I think that's something that is getting more clear as we progress.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear you say that, because I've been kind of ranting about this, but like security is again, I talked about being a late adopter or laggard. We're very risk averse. We're slow to adopt new technologies, and for good reason. Like we're cautious, right? We know things can happen, go bad. The problem with that is the business is adopting it, developers are adopting it, engineers are adopting, attackers are adopting it. Like if we don't become, we're going to risk perpetuating the kind of a bolted on rather than built-in paradigm that we're so used to when it comes to security. So I think we have to, like, we already know vulnerability backlogs are exponentially growing over year. Like CVEs are running away. Like we have to try to find any advantage we can, because we can't keep up. So I'd like to hear that, that you said that. I want to ask you as well, like you've talked about, using these technologies, using LLMs to find, issues like IDOR, authorization vulnerabilities, using LLMs and so on. Even for code that, the models weren't particularly trained on. And if I'm not mistaken, like the latest OWASP top 10, like these kind of logic flaws and things like that, authorization issues are still like the most pervasive type of risk on the list there. Like, what do you think makes this technology so unique that it's able to find some of these things that traditional tooling just couldn't do well, couldn't do successfully?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we are at that inflection point where, static analysis tool companies, they have started to realize, like it's they have to bake in AI, just not for the sake of it, but it actually works. It actually helps you find things that traditional tools cannot find. And I think the reason behind that is, just kind of the whole agent paradigm, right? Like agents can think, reason through, right? Like when you ask, so well, I'll take a step back and I'll first clarify the difference between an agent and just a workflow, because I think that itself gets lost. An agent is something or like a piece of software that if you ask the agent to do something, right, it will basically break that up into different milestones, so to speak. And after every milestone, the outcome of it, it'll actually look at the output and it will think about it. Okay, is this the right outcome? Am I moving in the right trajectory or not? And then it'll make the decision after that. So there's some autonomous behavior assigned there, right? And I think that is what an agentic solution really is, as compared to workflows or automation, where you just kind of uh, combining a bunch of scripts together, right? Like there's no autonomous behavior there, right? So that's the first thing I would like to clarify is why agentic sort of code security scanners are actually finding these vulnerabilities, which traditional scanners cannot find. It's because the agents can reason through the code and they can understand why something happened and the way it happened, is it the right way or not. And as practitioners or as people who use these tools, we can provide it the right context, right? And again, there's also this concept of, okay, do agents really work and whatnot. And I think there are so many nuances to it, where unless and until you build something and unless until you try it on a bunch of code bases, you won't really know what works. So to like sum it up, the point is traditional scanners were using pattern based ways to find security vulnerabilities. They would build an AST, they would use regular expression and whatnot, right? And these kind of approaches generally miss vulnerabilities that require the contextual understanding of the code base. So imagine authorization flaws, authentication flaws, right? Every application is a snowflake, right? Every application must be doing authentication, authorization in a unique way, right? So there's no way these traditional scanners can sort of cover all the unique cases, all the edge cases, and then try to find them, right? So that's the biggest disadvantage of using traditional scanners. Now, when you replace them with agents, or not replace, but when you augment them with agents can actually understand what the code base is doing, how it is doing something. And I think that's where the opportunity is, right? Like it's not about replacing traditional scanners with AI based scanners, but more about, okay, what signals can you take from the traditional based scanners that are really good, and how can you combine them with this agentic thought process, and then get to a very meaningful outcome. So yeah, if you take this approach, you will find that you can find a lot more impactful vulnerabilities that are more contextual.
Yeah, there's some amazing research and publications out there in terms of not just more contextual findings, but also drastically reduce false positives and things like that, which is like the bane of SaaS existence. And I love the distinction you drew between automation and autonomy. I think that's something that gets forgotten among the conversation here. Is like it's not predefined and kind of fully scoped in advance. It's non-deterministic, just like the LLM, and it may adapt, it may evolve, it may make different decisions based on context, as you put it. So great point there. I want to ask you too, 2025 in particular, we saw the rapid rise of MCP, right? The model context protocol, which of course is tightly coupled to the rise of agentic AI and tool use and things that we've touched on throughout the conversation. Like when you look at the adoption and growth of MCP, what are your thoughts there in terms of security risks and things to be conscious of, but also the opportunity, right? Because it seems, again, it's like that double-edged sword.
MCP is a very interesting piece of technology, I would say. I think when it first came, right, like it kind of allowed folks to combine different tools from different sources, right? Like you could combine a Jira MCP with, like, let's say a Confluence MCP, whatever it is. Like you could bring context in, you could bring data in as you wanted, right? So I think it kind of opened like a totally new attack surface where you were combining data from external sources, right? And the spec was still pretty nascent when it came to authentication authorization, right? So we've seen the spec improve over time, but MCP as a technology, I think it unlocks a bunch of opportunities where security teams can build super specific workflows by combining all these different security vendors and tools, right? Which wasn't possible before. Like if you had a bunch of security tools in a company, you would have to build some API glue to take results from one tool and then feed into other, and that was a very painful thing to do, right? Like, and to maintain it, all of that was a whole different thing. With MCP, all of that becomes easy because all of these vendors now have MCP servers which you could just kind of integrate with your IDE. So I think from a use perspective, I think MCP unlocks a whole bunch of opportunities. Now, there was some conversation around whether MCP is really required or not. There was a blog from Anthropic and Cloudflare as well, where they kind of showed that if you use MCP, it consumes a context window really soon, because it does multiple back and forth, where the context window gets used up really soon, right? So after that came skills, right? So now people are kind of debating if skills is useful or not. So without going there, I think, speaking about the security risk, look, MCP is uh, has a bunch of security concerns, right? Because it is eventually using an agent, and there's the identity piece associated with this. There's the observability piece associated with it, right? So there's a bunch of security fundamentals that I think people are still trying to figure out. Okay, how does, like, if you were to use MCP, how would it work? Do you need an MCP gateway? Do you want to sort of bake in some identity association with these agents? So I feel like there's so many unknowns in this space, and there are new attack vectors that come up constantly. And I think because of that, the adoption, at least for external MCP servers, hasn't been there. Right? Like, people can build internal MCP servers within organizations. It's kind of okay, like, because the attack surface isn't as bad. But when you start exposing MCP servers externally, I think that's when you have to really start asking questions like, okay, how is authentication working? How is authorization working? How do you know if the agent is doing what it's supposed to be doing? And I feel like folks are still trying to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I shared a report from, I think it was Clutch Security, had done
Yeah,
a
I
deep
saw that.
dive on the MCP ecosystem. They showed like at the end of November 2024, there was like less than 100 publicly exposed or available MCP servers. And by the end of 2025, there was just shy of 10,000. So it grew incredibly fast. And to your point, the spec has grown and matured around authentication, authorization. What was interesting is they also found like 85% of the MCP servers are running like locally on someone's endpoint,
Yeah.
not running as like an enterprise available service or something, which has some real security implications there too.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, you've also written about this concept of, I think you call it like security GPT, a security oracle that's trained on your organizational best practices, documentation, kind of advises the human on like, finding, triaging, remediating vulnerabilities, things like that. When you look at the growth of these tools and technologies and capabilities from your experiments and just kind of watching the landscape, where do you think we'll land in the next 2-3 years when we have this concept of kind of a security GPT or an oracle to advise us?
Yeah, like this concept of on call, right? Every company has a security on call, right? Like, people, like, if there's an incident, or if there's a breach, people who are on call get called into address that. And oftentimes, these folks, they need some kind of a sort of an oracle, or some kind of a way to ask questions or answer questions, right? And I think we are kind of heading that direction where, look, every company has a bunch of data about how things work inside that company, their infrastructure, the architecture, their security controls, whatsoever, right? And it's just not possible for any security engineer to know each and every nuance, each and every detail of how certain things work. So now, if we were to take all of that data, right, companies' proprietary data, and just kind of make it available to an agent, and then use that agent to ask those questions, I feel like the whole, job of security professionals being on call and being able to help others and answer questions, I think that kind of becomes easier right now, because you've basically, again, offloaded that task of asking questions and answering them to an agent, and the agent has information about all the knowledge base. So we are trying to do something similar at Lyft as well. I don't want to go too much into it, but I definitely see some promising approaches there. Like, how can you build this oracle or security GPT that can answer your questions for all of your customers? And by customers, I mean internal engineering teams, right? Because we often see engineering teams want to build something, they have certain questions about crypto, blah blah blah, and they will often come to us, right? And that kind of consumes our human cycles. So yeah, I think there is a way to go about solving that problem.
Yeah, it's an interesting, as you were saying that, I thought about something that's interesting. On one hand, I could see it minimizes some of that back and forth, like just asking, like, how do we handle this? What is our process on this? What is our policy on this? But I guess, on the one hand, I could see it being super beneficial and like cutting down that human back and forth and just speeding up, the ability to do things. But also, when I think about it, that's often how we build relationships with development and engineering. It's kind of like interfacing and interacting together. So there could be interesting implications there of like, we don't interact anymore. You just go ask the Oracle, don't ask me, you know? So that could be interesting too.
I think there is also a subtle point there is, I mean, I don't know your thoughts. I would love to know more about it, but I think the role of security teams will also change, right? Like I don't see a future where there are going to be individual siloed teams, doing AppSec or cloud security or vulnerability management. It's all going to get like a single team, and that team will have AI skills. That team will work with engineering folks, right? So it's like you won't have that feeling that security is like this team that sits away from us, that is only meant to block us, right? I think we need to move away from that, and I think I'm starting to see some of that already happening.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. And honestly, like we see that on the product side too. When you look at the industry, it's like, there was the, cloud and then AppSec, and like now they're all kind of being collapsed into platforms. And I suspect, to your point, we'll see something happen similar with teams in the organization. And it's funny because there was quote unquote DevSecOps, and it was meant to break down silos and all that, but we still have these siloed teams that don't really interact with one another until there's a security review or an incident or something like that. So I think you're spot on in that case. But yeah, as we wrap up here, AB, any thing you want to throw out there for folks to keep an eye on, something that they can check out, where can they find you, and so on?
Yeah. So you can find out all about me at my website, anshuman.ai. I think some of the work that OASP is doing, Chris, is awesome, right? Especially the Agentic Security Initiative. There's some good folks trying to solve good problems, especially in this Agentic world, right? So I would recommend folks to join the OASP Slack and then kind of help out wherever it's required. And yeah, I would say, if you're a security practitioner, security person listening to this, start building agents. I think that's the best way you can learn about this technology, like evolution. And I think that's really required, because if we as security professionals are expected to secure against these implementations, we better understand how they work in the first place. And the best way to learn is to actually start building it. That's a thing that I've followed throughout my career. I've built a bunch of open source tools just because I wanted to learn certain piece of technology, right? So, and I think that's the right way, because you learn so many nuanced things that you don't otherwise. So yeah,
I think you're spot on. Like you can learn a lot by reading and writing and thinking and things like that, but doing is the best way, especially with technology. Yeah. So thanks so much for jumping on, Anshuman. I enjoy your work. I follow your work, and I'll continue to do so. I'll drop your website as well as Secure Vibes in the show notes for folks who want to check it out, and hope you have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Chris. It was really awesome to be here.
Take care.